Good afternoon, everybody. Monday, October 27th. We've just made it through Mageddon. We're here on the other side. One game to go. Fire up your Marcus Mariotas and your Zach Ertzes and your Brashard Smiths tonight. Hoping for 30 points from Rashee Rice to bail me out of some tough spots. But we're here. Go Birds. Devin Totoro. I'm right there with you. We're back up today, but let's see what the chat's up to. We got a lot to talk about. A lot of risers and fallers as always. Some data to drop and the any second list, of course. Hey guys, I never remember to say any of this, but if you could like the stream, that'd be pretty sick. And if you're watching on replay, you don't have to subscribe yet, but hang out for a bit. You'll see it's worth it. TaylorMade is here with a let's go. We got Austin here. He was early today, ready to roll. One of our league winners. Yellow Dog, another league winner here. So let's talk about some week 8. And let's start here, I guess. Skattebo is going to be on the fallers list, of course, which is unfortunate. Giants are a division rival, but man, I hate seeing, really anybody get hurt, especially like that. And he genuinely seemed like a really cool player. So that was the one, thing that put a damper on otherwise what was a great game for the Eagles. Just really sucks, for any player, but for an exciting rookie who has really, as a day 3 pick already worked their way into that type of a role, built up such an identity for that team. That's a huge blow. And I think for Dynasty, it's really tough because it's such an unconventional, not an unconventional type of player, but like when you see a day 3 running back, like if you just said, okay, round 4 running back had some good games, broke their ankle, they're going to be, how old is Skattebo? Isn't he going to be like, he's a little bit of an older rookie, isn't he? Going to be 24 in February. So like not that young. I feel like in general, you'd fade that player pretty hard, but Skattebo does have a bit of, brand equity where it feels like it's less likely that the Giants would go out and make a big addition at running back. I don't know that that's accurate, especially if they do go a different direction with the general manager. But I think where I landed on Skattebo is in the early second range. And I think you probably want to pick your spots with him. Certainly happy to try to buy low on any non-competing team because the upside is absolutely there. We know he has that really fantasy-friendly skill set, but it is high variance. It's high risk because we don't know for sure that he'll be 100% to start next year. I think it's similar to what we saw from Chris Godwin. Obviously, he's a younger player, and we don't know how the severity is going to match up, how the rehab's going to match up. But then there's also the risk of free agent additions, draft picks. The ideal is that they stick with Tyrone Tracy and Cam Skattebo and they just say, we're good with these two guys for next year. That's your dream scenario, in which case you'll be making a profit on that investment. So that's where I've landed around the RB or around that early second range, I should say. Right now, first, initial rankings update, I have him at RB21. I have him just ahead of Jalen Warren and Baishal Tutin. You could certainly make the argument to put Warren ahead of him. I think it would be totally fine to trade him for Jalen Warren on a competing team, and I may end up moving him down a little bit further. It's just hard when you have this like anchor towards what you thought a player was worth, and then everything changes really quickly. So I am trying to go back to that and think about it more. All right. So that was a quick little diversion. I see a lot of you guys here talking in the chat. I can't keep up with all of it. Max, I'm sorry I didn't shout you out, bro. You're another absolute legend, a league winner. That's my bad for sure. All right. I will say, Uncle Ted here, just want to say this. Didn't see him getting hurt coming with the contact he purposely chases. I think this is kind of a dumb take, like not to call you out in particular, but I think it's kind of insensitive, just the fact that he did get injured to be saying this stuff. But I mean, I watched the play, he got hurt. It wasn't anything that would have it would have happened to any running back. He literally ran like a Texas route, and then he caught the ball, and the way he got tackled, his foot got caught under him. So it really had nothing to do with him seeking out contact. And I think the argument that he's like more injury prone because he plays aggressively is kind of silly. It's like when they say rushing quarterbacks get hurt more, and then you see a rushing quarterback who gets sacked in the pocket the way any quarterback would, and they're like, see, mobile quarterbacks get hurt. It's like, no, like things just happen. Things just happen. And he got hurt in the same way any running back could have got hurt. Teton Hills with the super chat already. I appreciate you. Coming in clutch with the first one of the day. Worth buying Devonta Smith and a second for a 27 first. So I think that value-wise, that's pretty fine. Like if you just added up the value of those assets. I do actually think I'd prefer to hold the first for now. If you have the first, I'd rather hold on to that pick and look for other ways that you can spend it, because it is going to gain value. And it is a scarce asset that you can really only trade once. And so, yes, Devonta Smith's a useful player. I think he's worth about a late first. So you add a second on top of that, the value adds up. I think you could wait, see if you can package that first with something else for more of a difference maker. If you have Devonta Smith and a second, I guess whether this would work the other way, I think it would depend on the team that holds the 27 first. If it's a more fragile team, I would make the move to just get the pick, because I think you have a lot more value upside there. If it's a pretty strong, high value team, I might just hold on to Smith. All right. Just going to get to this last note on Skattebo, and then we're going to get on to the rest of the actual planned content. Injury experts say his comeback will depend on if he needs 1 or 2 surgeries. Compared it to the Tyreek Hill injury, that's a little shocking to me. I mean, it's obviously a completely different injury in terms of the mechanism, like the body part. So I would need more context there. But I saw Jeff Mueller, who's one of the guys that I tend to like on the injury stuff, was saying that he would say more than likely he would expect him to be ready to go for 2026. So, all right, we're going to jump into the data drop first. I did this last week, and I'm going to try to keep this going, where this is just me picking out a couple of data, just tweets from the people who actually are able to dig into this stuff right away after the games. I like to go and see and shout them out. These people are worth supporting if you're on these platforms. Ian Harditz is great. I actually haven't seen a lot of content from this gentleman here on the bottom, which we'll talk about his tweet in a second. Zane Danani, I guess is how you'd say that. But good looks here with his tweet. And then, fantasy points data, Ryan Heath, Jacob Gibbs, JJ Zacharyson. These are people I like to go to because they kind of know how to pull out the interesting and useful stuff. And it makes my job a little bit easier when it's a Monday afternoon and I'm trying to catch up on some things that I couldn't catch immediately. and kind of get some quick takes out there. So I like this tweet from Ian. Highest target shares in the NFL through 8 weeks. Now, this is sorted by team target percentage. And so I suspect this is not adjusted for games missed. Otherwise, we'd see Puka Nacua here. So it's like all of your team's targets. So players that miss games are not going to be here. Puka Nacua is not going to be here. But still, very interesting to see number 4, Zay Flowers, 30.7% of his team's targets. This is why I highlighted him as a buy about a month ago. And since then, we've had the Lamar injury, the Cooper Rush debacle. But we saw it yesterday, just getting even mildly competent quarterback in Tyler Huntley on the field was a big deal for Zay Flowers. So I think you have to hope Lamar's back next week. The schedule gets very easy for the Ravens. I think Zay Flowers remains a pretty solid buy. And I already have him on a lot of teams, but if you don't, I would definitely recommend going out and seeing what you can swap for Zay Flowers, because he's just not valued that highly on any of these sites. And I understand why to an extent, because he hasn't come through in the box score consistently. But all of the numbers say like this is something that's coming. So I'd rather have him still than Marvin Harrison, who continues to be ranked ahead of him. I'd rather have Flowers than, say, T. Higgins, who scored a long touchdown yesterday on, I believe, 2 or 3 total targets. I'd happily add a little bit to like a DK Metcalf to get to Zay Flowers. So I think you have options there. We got a couple of super chats to get to real quick. One from Johnny 2K. Gadsden or Laporta straight up, 1.5 tight end premium. We will talk about Gadsden. I am taking Oronde Gadsden over Laporta personally. It's not by a wide margin, but that's who I would take at this point. Can you give some of your favorite cheap running back and wide receiver buys? Man, that's tough. That's tough to do on the spot. I'll try to throw a couple names out there for you though, since you've got the super chat. I think Jalen Coker is maybe worth a look as a buy. I guess you asked specifically for buys. Yeah. So Jalen Coker, getting eased back in from the injury. We'll see when the quarterback situation improves, but I do believe he's better than Xavier Liga and everybody on the Panthers that's not named Ted McMillan. He could take over that slot role for them. So he's an intriguing name for me. I don't know exactly if he's a buy because I don't know how the market's going to react. Chamir DK, I believe is how you say his name, from the Titans. That rookie wide receiver who's had 2 big games in a row. I don't know if I'd call him a buy just because everybody's kind of aware at this point that he's taken a step forward and nobody's necessarily going to just flip him to you for a 4th now. But he's maybe worth, trying to get thrown into a trade. I think Isaiah Davis at running back is a guy that's worth getting thrown into trades if you can. He's obviously coming off a big game as well, but might be written off as a bit fluky. But he's actually, I think he's like a legit good player. He was one of JJ Zacharyason's favorite in his model when he came out last year. He's been buried on the depth chart. But yeah, I think he's actually a legit good player. I think it's unlikely Breece Hall gets traded, but it's not impossible. And even if he doesn't get traded, he's probably going to a new team in the offseason. So just a guy you can stash. He has that handcuff upside. He has the potential to slide into a larger role next year if that backfield opens up. Not a bad guy that doesn't carry much value whatsoever. Trying to go maybe a little bit less like dart throw range, maybe a little bit higher up the board. I think Rico Dowdle is a guy you want to be trying to buy off of a disappointing game. I'll wrap up on this one. Rico Dowdle, there's been some comments. If people aren't paying attention to the coach speak, the comments from Dave Canales really seem like the team knows that they have to go to more featuring Rico Dowdle and reducing Chuba Hubbard's role, because it has not been close between these two in the last 2 weeks in terms of performance. And the fact that it's been split 50-50 has really handcuffed Dowdle. But the comments after this past game are like, we know Rico's been phenomenal. We really appreciate what Chuba Hubbard's done for the team. Like, you can go look up Coach Speak Index, or you can look up the press conference. These comments to me read like, we're about to hand Rico the keys and, thank you, Chuba Hubbard, for your service. So if you can go send 2 third-round picks or something for Rico on a running back needy team, I think that would be pretty intriguing. All right. Thanks again, J Money, for the super chat. I want to get to this other little bit of data here from Zane. Bears backfield split changing up a little bit maybe. In week 8, we had DeAndre Swift getting 50% of the snaps, Monangai at 45.2%. They ran roughly the same number of routes, although Monangai was actually slightly higher percentage. And then inside the 10, Monangai slightly outsnapped Swift. Now that's pretty noisy inside the 10 in a 1-game sample because you only get a handful of snaps inside the 10-yard line anyway. But the fact that it was that much of a split, I think that this comparison at the bottom, dollar store Gibbs Montgomery, is actually pretty solid, right? Like, this is Ben Johnson's offense. He did that split with Gibbs and Montgomery in Detroit. I have never been of the opinion that DeAndre Swift is a supreme talent. In fact, I've always thought he was a pretty below average running back. He certainly does a couple of things well, but he's never had good vision. He's never been great after contact, and he has limitations. And I think he's probably best deployed in some kind of a split. And I think we're seeing that materialize with Monangai. So I view DeAndre Swift as a bit of a sell high candidate after his recent stretch, where he's looked a lot better in the box score than I think he actually has been. And the Bears' schedule actually gets a lot harder for running backs. That paired with an increased role for Monangai has me a little concerned about Swift moving forward. If you can get anything close to like an early second for him, if you could sell him for somebody like Jalen Noel, who I'm going to talk about later, or like Woody Marks, I'd rather have Woody Marks. I think that's worth doing. So maybe just kick the tires on some DeAndre Swift trades in your leagues would be my takeaway here. All right. By the way, Sam, sold Chuba for a second and a third. Is that fair? Absolutely. I'm just about ready to move Chuba Hubbard out of my second round range. I have him in my late second tier, and I don't know how much longer he's going to be a startable running back. We'll see what next year brings, but I think he could be cut. I think he could be in a totally new environment, and I don't know that he's necessarily good enough to command, a significant workload on the open market. So, all right, we're going to move on to the any second list. Before I put this up, the any second list, as I do each week, this is a list of Dynasty assets that, assuming you have relatively normal settings, 12 team, super flex, PPR, tight end premium, that's my default. Anything close, relatively close to that, these are guys I would sell for any rookie second round pick. I have not gotten every single one of these correct this year, or there have been guys on this list that have rebounded and gained value, but I think overall it's a helpful exercise when you can churn players on the bottom end of your roster into these picks, because they maintain value, they actually grow in value, they become useful trade chips for you later, and they allow you to either add youth to your team through the rookie draft, which is important for keeping your team young, keeping your buying power high, or they let you make more deals. They give you more flexibility. So last week on this list, we had Romeo Doubs, we had Ramondre Stevenson, and we had Kayshon Boutte. Now, I feel fine about these calls. Kayshon has had a couple of decent games in the last 3 weeks. He's doing it on touchdowns primarily, but, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't impressed by some of the plays he's made and that he hasn't shown any improvement. I still remain skeptical that he's ever going to be more than a streaming flex option. I think he's a guy that's probably going to be better as a best ball asset for the remainder of his career. Ramondre went right back to being ineffective as soon as the Patriots weren't playing an absolutely terrible rush defense. Got absolutely outplayed by Trevion Henderson. So still totally comfortable selling Ramondre for any second. And then Romeo Doubs, we saw Christian Watson back in the mix. Still haven't gotten Jaden Reed back. There's too many mouths to feed, which is not a statement that I typically would say for an extremely talented pass catcher. But for somebody like Dobbs, who I think is more just fine, a guy that's capable of filling a role, I think that when you have Reed and Kraft and Golden and Watson all on the field, he's just never going to be an impact producer. You know, he's a guy that can definitely contribute when players are injured, when you need a deep flex option, but he's a sell for me at that price if you can get it. This week, though, we have three options on the any second list. First one is Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason, really, really bad game this past week with Aaron Jones back in the lineup. I mean, the Vikings couldn't get anything going on the ground. They were behind early, so they couldn't run that much. Mason's going to have better days than that. He's not just like a totally nothing asset, but he doesn't catch passes. And now Aaron Jones is back to cut into some of that work on the ground too. He's very much just a touchdown or bust running back at this point. Otherwise, you're going to get, 12 carries for 60 yards maybe on a good day. So you can speculate about what his role looks like in the future, but I think he's 26 or 27 already. Doesn't have like a long-term deal in place. No idea whether the Vikings want to roll with him long-term as a featured back. So would happily cash out on him for a second. Tyler Shugg, I believe it's Shugg or Shuck, I don't know. This one's a bit of a long shot, but in Superflex leagues, we saw Spencer Rattler get benched yesterday. Tyler Shugg came in. Not really a lot to make of what he was able to do. Like, it was a blowout loss. They were just throwing the ball. Truth be told, I didn't go back and watch, all of his play. My take here is simply that if somebody is going to see, okay, Saints starting quarterback, I want to get ahead of a starting quarterback. This guy got drafted 40th overall. I want to take the chance on him as a big riser. I'm happy to let somebody else take that chance. I think the evidence is probably pretty strongly against him being a very good quarterback. The fact that he's been sitting behind Spencer Rattler this whole time and couldn't win the starting job when I'm sure that the front office and the coaches wanted him to win the job. It's not encouraging. Right? This feels like a desperation move where they had no choice but to make a change. But he's a very old quarterback prospect. He was a very unimpressive quarterback prospect. I think more likely than not, this is going to be similar to the Dylan Gabriel experiment, right? Where he's going to come in and kind of do the bare minimum, and maybe he'll keep starting because they don't have better options. But I really doubt he's going to become a fantasy difference maker, or honestly, I would bet pretty heavily against him even being like a starter after this year. So happily cashing out on Shuck if anybody's interested. And then Keon Coleman, probably the boldest call here. I have just had enough. I've had enough of Keon Coleman. I just don't know, what are you supposed to do with a guy who since week 1 has not had more than 4 receptions in a game. He's had exactly 3 receptions in 5 of his 6 games. He's had 26 yards, 20 yards, 45 yards, 23 yards, 11 yards, 30 yards. Is he going to have 1 or 2 random big games at some point? Probably. I think we're getting to a point now, a year and a half into his career, where the Bills haven't really had any consistent pass catchers. They haven't had any high-end talents. I'm not really sure when we're supposed to see some kind of a big improvement for Keon Coleman. I think he just is what he is. He charted out horribly in reception perception as a rookie because he doesn't get separation. He's a situational, contested target type of guy, and he's just not. I would happily take a second over that type of a guy because he's just like he's just a dart throw, when you put him in there, like, oh, I hope he catches a touchdown. I hope he gets 40 yards and a touchdown. There's just no point in Keon Coleman. I had tried to move him up a bit in the ranks after that week 1 game where I tried to be open-minded, like second-year wide receiver. He was young when he came into the league. Maybe something is changing. It has become increasingly clear since that week 1 game that there was just some kind of matchup they could exploit in that one game. Ravens defense was not prepared for that. Every other defense has been prepared for that. So it's just really gross with Keon. So I'm happy to move on from him at this point. All right. Shocked emoji. I think I'd rather keep Kayshon Boutte than Christian Watson if you have to choose between the two, but I don't think either of them should be dropped in any like normal sized PPR dynasty. And I guess I don't know what normal sized is. In my leagues, nobody like that is hitting the waiver wire, but we have like 26, maybe 26, 27 roster spots plus taxi plus IR. If you're in a shallower league, maybe a half PPR league, I think I could see dropping one of those players. Is it worth sending a first for Waddle? I think it's fine to do that. Again, I'm always aiming a little bit higher with first round picks, but where I have him ranked, certainly, I have him as like a borderline top 50 asset. He's been very solid outside of one game since Tyreek Hill went out. He's dominating the targets. He's making splash plays, signs of life from Tua this past week. So I think that it's fine to do that if you're like a locked in playoff team and that's a late pick. I would not mess around with a 2027 first for Jalen Waddle. I wouldn't mess around with if you're a fringe playoff team, I'm not trading my first for Waddle thinking that's going to get me over the top. Just not interested in doing that. All right. I'm going to move on to the risers and fallers here. I see some questions about RJ Harvey. I guess I can talk about Harvey for a second. He's not on the risers list. What are you trying to sell Harvey for right now? No way his stock is higher than a 3-touchdown game. Here's what I'll say. If you could take RJ Harvey and you could add something small, pretty small, to get a first, even like a playoff first, or even better, a future first, I would sell him. Otherwise, I'm not really that interested in selling him because what I see of RJ Harvey is is this a real breakout performance in the sense that something meaningfully changed about the way he's used? No. He played like 27% of the snaps or something. Let me see. I had it pulled up. He played 28% of the snaps in a blowout win. He had 7 rush attempts and 1 target, and he happened to score 3 touchdowns. So he didn't have his usage change. But did he look freaking awesome in that game? Absolutely he did. They drafted him in the 2nd round. He looks great. I mean, he's had multiple of these games where he broke like a 70-yard run in week 1. A few weeks ago, he had another big performance where he scored a touchdown. He had that 2-touchdown game against the Bengals, I think. And then this game happens. He clearly makes big plays, and he does bring something to the table that Dobbins doesn't. Dobbins is not a long-term piece for the Broncos, at least not yet. He's not under a long-term contract. So I'm not just looking to get out of him to get out of him. I don't think Harvey is just a bust. I think he's a good player who has been held back by circumstances that I didn't foresee. But anyway, yeah, what can we make of Harvey and what would you move him for? So like I said, I'd be aiming for a first. I think if you want to re-roll him for an early 2nd round pick, if somebody's that eager to get him, that you can get a 201, 202 type of pick, then sure. As far as player for player stuff, like where I have him ranked, if you could move him for I still think I value him higher than the market does. If you can move him for Luther Burden, I would rather have Burden. If you can move him for Kenneth Walker, I think I'd rather roll the dice on Walker getting a better situation next year than Harvey. Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, if you really need a productive asset right now. But again, I think most of the time I'm still going to be higher than the average person is because I still believe in the talent and I still think it's a good running back situation once his role increases. So let's get to risers here. We've got a lot of players to talk about in risers and fallers. So I will circle back around for questions at the end after risers and fallers. And as we move into this segment, I'll just want to throw it out there one more time. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these weekly streams. If you want to catch the actual videos that usually come out every week, missed a week last week, but otherwise every week. And I did also pin the link to the membership in the chat. That's where you can see my Dynasty rankings in full that are updated every week. You can catch my weekly live streams that I do on Friday or Saturdays that are just for the members. And you can get into the Pure Potential Discord and you can talk my ear off about trades. You can roast the rankings. You can do whatever in there, and I will almost always respond to you. So risers, we have Drake Maye at the top. I'm not going to spend long on Drake Maye, but he has come through with another huge performance. I think it's a fine line in Dynasty between being reactionary and being late. And when I updated the rankings today, I couldn't come up with a really, really good reason to not make Drake Maye my Dynasty 101. I don't think you have to value him there. I think it's very tight between him and several other players. But I think you can make a pretty good argument to put Drake Maye as the Dynasty 101 because he is playing MVP level football and he's doing it in a way that scores a ton of fantasy points. He throws touchdowns. He runs the ball. He is built like Josh Allen, but he's 23 years old and he's not even on that good of a team. Like he is building this offense out of nothing. It's not a terrible supporting cast, but it's not a good one. And he is just delivering every single week. So, imagine if Drake Maye had an elite supporting cast. Imagine if they go out and they add another legit wide receiver weapon. Imagine they build up the offensive line even better. Imagine they actually give Trevion Henderson the majority of the touches and he starts making big explosive plays to keep these drives going, get them into the red zone more. Like, I don't see any reason why Drake Maye can't finish as the overall QB1. And if he does that, or even close to that at his age, with this team, he's the 101 to me. If you want to take Jaden Daniels, if you want to take Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Puka Nacua even, Jamar Chase, I have no issue with any of those picks. I think any of those 6 players can be the Dynasty 101, but I'm just throwing it out there. I moved Drake Maye to the top of the rankings today. All right, Breece Hall finally did the thing. He finally scored a touchdown, and then he scored another touchdown, and then I believe he scored another touchdown, but a passing touchdown. And man, it was glorious. I've been starting Breece Hall. I've been buying Breece Hall. I've been waiting for this to happen. He's a great football player, and you love to see it. He is currently, according to Zach Rosenblatt, 6th in yards among running backs. He's averaging 5 yards per carry, which is 10th best. 2nd and 3rd down run conversion percentage, 12th in yards after contact per attempt, 2nd in explosive runs of 10 or more yards, and 4th in first downs. He's on pace for 1,235 rushing yards, but just 4 touchdowns because this team does kind of suck. So he has this skill set. He also has an elite pass catching skill set. And he's a guy that I want to keep buying into. If somebody wants to sell high on Breece Hall, I want to buy because he is 24 years old. He doesn't turn 25 until May. For context, right? James Cook is 26 years old. Jonathan Taylor is 26 years old. Actually, yeah, Jonathan Taylor will be 27 in January. So you're talking about a very young running back who has a ton of time to find himself in a better situation and maximize this skill set. So he's a riser. He actually isn't a huge riser for me because I've had him in the rankings pretty high already. But I think he's a riser in the public eye after this game. And I think he probably still won't rise high enough. The Pokemon guy, Nix over Williams. Williams is a bust. Nix is a young franchise quarterback. I think this is pretty funny to say after Bo Nix played like 5 terrible games in a row and then had a couple of good games. One was against the... who was the most recent one? Against the Giants, where he did everything in the fourth quarter after being terrible the whole game. And then I don't remember who this most recent game was against, but I don't know. I don't find this that compelling. I mean, I think Caleb Williams is a fall. I mean, Caleb Williams is on the fallers list, but I don't know. This feels like a little bit of cherry picking or recency bias or whatever you want to call it. Trade Jacobs for Breece. Yeah, I would do that. I don't have them terribly far apart, but I would rather have Breece Hall personally. I think Jacobs will still likely outscore him the rest of this season. I'm hoping not by much because I do have more Breece Hall than Jacobs, but I think long term, with the age difference, with what I think the ceiling is for Hall, I would rather have Breece. So I would rather have Breece Hall than Saquon Barkley too. I just think, you know, there's a lot of risk with Barkley, even though he just had that big game. It's very situational, you know, it's very much team dependent. But I think in a vacuum, I would still rather have Breece. I think with this one, CMC or Breece and a second, for me, that just depends on like what your team is doing right now. Although I think I would just take McCaffrey either way, because the way the market has valued McCaffrey and the way I have him valued ahead of Breece. I have him at RB9. I have him a tier ahead. I think value-wise, Breece in the second is about even, but I wouldn't trade CMC for that package because I think you have a lot more exciting options. If you are not contending and you have McCaffrey and you're trying to offload him, you have so many options for who to send him to because every single prospective playoff team is going to want Christian McCaffrey. You know, you can go out and look for, like, how can you go out and get like a Bucky Irving for Christian McCaffrey? How can you go out and get like Tet McMillan or Emeka Egbuka? Like, what do you have to add to get one of those guys? Or even somebody like Travis Hunter or Ladd McConkey, where you get like a young building block wide receiver. I just think there's a lot of things you can do with McCaffrey, and this isn't really how I'd want to pivot off of him in a rebuild. Eli, what would you trade away CMC for on a strong contender? I mean, I just simply wouldn't trade CMC away on a strong contender. I just don't think there's any reason to do that. I guess the answer, if you force me to give an answer, is like I would basically want some like elite player straight up. Like, give me Ashton Genty straight up. Give me Trey McBride straight up. Give me Emeka Egbuka, Drake London. You know, give me Amari and Hampton plus. Otherwise, what's the point? I'm not going to make a lateral move to give away CMC on a contender. Jamie, I don't think 1.5 tight end premium is common. I think when people say 1.5, they mean one base PPR plus a 0.5 bonus. I've never played in a league where 2.5 PPR for tight end is the rule. An extra full point is the highest I've ever seen in my leagues. So I would say when people say 1.5, they mean 1 plus the bonus of 0.5. All right, next riser here is Tucker Kraft, and we've got two tight ends back to back. On Thursday Night Football, Oronde Gadsden had his big game, and I actually leapfrogged him over Tucker Kraft. I was immediately reminded why that was a bad idea on Sunday Night Football when Tucker Kraft went absolutely nuclear and forced me to start paying more attention to him. He is fantastic, and I've definitely been a little bit asleep at the wheel with Tucker Kraft. Now, to be fair, the Packers are goofy, and they don't feature their best players all the time. And so you go and look at like the Tucker Kraft target shares, and they can be very underwhelming for 2-3 weeks at a time. But I think this year they are starting to figure something out with him as a yards after catch weapon, and he is really becoming the engine of the offense. So I have moved Tucker Kraft up considerably. I moved him up a tier into my base first tier. I have him in the same range as like Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, George Pickens. That's around where I have Tucker Kraft ranked. And I like this tweet here from Ryan Heath. For Tucker Kraft, in 3 games that he has appeared on the injury report, only an 11.7% target share, 42 yards per game, 9.6 fantasy points per game, kind of in like the tight end 20 zone. But in the 4 games that he has not appeared on the injury report, he has been tight end 2 in target share at 23.5%, tight end 1 in yards per game at 85, and tight end 1 in points per game at 21.1. So might just be a case where he doesn't play through injuries well, or maybe, you know, when he's on the injury report, it means he's really hurting and he's a tough player who plays through it. But if this type of a trend holds, it's pretty easy to know when you want to be, going after Tucker Kraft. I guess that applies more to like a DFS context than where you already have him on your lineup. But basically just start him every week. He has these huge spike weeks in his repertoire, which is not something that every tight end has. So he's my tight end 4 in Dynasty. Okay. Bowers, McBride, and Warren are the top 3. Then I go to Tucker Kraft at 4. So big moves for Kraft, and I think he's the top target in that offense moving forward. Then we get to Oronde Gadsden, who is now my tight end 5 in Dynasty. I was thinking of doing like a little top 10 recap, but I didn't have time to put that together. If you guys are interested, I could maybe do next week's stream, like top 10 quarterbacks and tight ends. I am planning to put together longer videos to go over my my most recent tiers of running backs and wide receivers, and kind of give you an update on how I see the Dynasty landscape. But I don't think I'll do a full video for quarterbacks and tight ends. So maybe I could just go over it a little bit in the live stream. But anyway, Gadsden looking amazing. He has been one of the shocking storylines of the season. His route participation rate has been up over the last 3 games from 77% to 79% to 94%, which is crazy for tight ends. Like, you don't even see that very often. He's had a 21%, 17%, and 21% target share. And because that's in a really, really high volume offense, it has led to a lot of fantasy points. He just looks like a great player. The only thing with Gadsden you need to keep in mind is that he does have to develop a bit as a blocker, because right now he's a pretty big liability there, and the Chargers are really tipping their intentions when he's on the field. They don't run very much if he's on the field in 11 personnel, but he can improve at that. He has the size. The coaches love him. So I think he deserves to be the tight end 5 in Dynasty. I'm not all that impressed with Sam Laporta as a fantasy asset. I think he's a great player in real life. I think this offense is so run heavy and so focused on Amon-Ra St. Brown in the passing game. It's just really hard for him to be a consistent option. He's going to have big games, which is why he remains in that tier and my tight end 6. But he's just not a consistent week in and week out option because he's not a focal point. The team is looking for Gibbs first, Amon-Ra second, and then kind of like Laporta / Montgomery, and then Jameson Williams is like a distant 5th right now. So that's what it is with Laporta. But Gadsden looks like a stud. I really want to buy into this breakout. I think it's legit. I think he's a weekly start moving forward. And the great thing is we can just reevaluate in the offseason whether we think he's going to develop as a blocker, whether he's going to add that element to his game, because this deployment's probably not going to change much the rest of the year. Not till they go back to the drawing board and kind of figure out what they want to do with this team next offseason. Do we have to ask the tough questions? Is he going to become a Dalton Kincaid type who only gets to play half the snaps because he can't block? If that's what happens, then that sucks. But fortunately, his coaches seem to feel differently about, whether he should be on the field or not than the Bills coaches do about Kincaid. And I do have Gadsden ahead of Loveland now. I waited to do that an extra week. I think that it's totally fair to have Gadsden ahead. I mean, Loveland, I think he's still ramping up. Like, he is a very young player. He was injured in the offseason. He also has a genuinely like a bad quarterback right now. Caleb Williams, we're going to talk about him in the fallers. He has been really rough the last few weeks. But at the end of the day, Cole Kmet was out. He played a full-time role. He got 4 targets. He is just not there yet. And even if he gets there, he ramps up. He has a long way to go to get to where Gadsden already is. So I think at this point, with what we've seen, I'm willing to just flip Gadsden ahead, despite the difference in draft capital, despite the difference in college pedigree. All right. I'm going to move on to Michael Pittman. Next riser. I finally moved Pittman up into my late 1 tier, the very bottom of it. That does not mean that I would go and trade a first round pick for Michael Pittman, but it means, value wise, I would value him pretty close to where you might value like the 111, 112 pick. He has been fantastic this year. And it's not like all a surprise because he had done it before in 2023 when he was healthy. He had a huge year. Last year, he was riddled with this back injury. And I probably got a little bit too low on him, mostly because I was so high on Josh Downs and I thought he could improve, but also because I didn't see this passing game being as functional as it was. I thought we would have Richardson mixed in. I thought Daniel Jones was supposed to suck. That was my understanding, or at least be average, but he's been fantastic, which means all these pass catchers are getting a boost. And Pittman is clearly the number 1 wide receiver for this team. He runs all the routes. He keeps scoring touchdowns, probably because he's 6'4" and very physical. So Pittman looks great. He is a really useful piece for contenders down the stretch. There's not a whole lot more to say about him. Jalen Noel. The Texans just have no clue what they're doing. I know people don't like it when it's like, oh, the fantasy football guy thinks he can run a football team. It is absolutely ridiculous that this team is limiting the playing time of Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, particularly Noel, in favor of like Braxton Berrios and Xavier Hutchinson and Christian Kirk. There's just no reason that these rookies should be on the field, especially Noel, who has made multiple really, really impressive plays when he's been on the field. Good tweet from Ryan Heath here, who has the wide receiver usage for the Texans without Nico Collins and Christian Kirk, combining week 7 and week 8. Jalen Noel only got 45% of those routes, but on those routes, he saw 10 targets, which he turned into 106 yards. He had 2.94 yards per route run when the next closest Texans wide receiver or tight end was at 1.55. 28% targets per out run for Noel, 17% first downs per out run. He has just been by far the most effective non-Nico Collins pass catcher for the Texans. And it's ridiculous that he's not running, the majority of the routes at this point. But he is a rookie. I think he will increase his playing time, and this is the time you want to go and get him. I guess the time you wanted to get him was before this week, but the next best time is now, and I think better days are ahead. I have moved Noel ahead of Higgins. I think he's the better wide receiver. I think it was always possible that was the case. They were very similar at Iowa State. But I think Noel is just better for what this team needs. And he's a better complement to Nico Collins, if we're being honest. So I've moved him up close to my base second tier. If you have like a late second, playoff second, and you're interested in speculating on a buy, he's somebody that I would send it for. Or some dusty vet. Somebody like, I think selling high on like DeAndre Swift for Jalen Noel, I think is a very sensible type of move in Dynasty right now. All right, a couple more of these. Tyrone Tracy is pretty self-explanatory. Cam Skattebo going to be out for the season. Tracy slides into the starting role. I don't think he's going to get the same treatment as Skattebo because I don't think he's as good of a player, to be honest. I think Devin Singletary will be more involved. He's probably worth stashing in Dynasty if he's on waivers in a deeper league. But Tracy's going to be the starter. He does have the pass catching upside. I assume he will get most of the goal line short yardage stuff. He won't have a lock on it like Skattebo did. But yeah, he's going to get probably 65-ish% of the backfield opportunities. That moves him up a tier from when he was a handcuff running back. So clearly a winner. I think everybody kind of knows that. There's not really a secret there, but he's a riser. DK, I talked about a little bit. Rookie wide receiver for the Titans. Just want to run through what he's done the last couple days or couple weeks. Week 7 and 8 together. 81.5 receiving yards per game, 2.59 yards per route run, 21% first read target share, and a total 17% team target share. This is data from the Fantasy Points data suite sent out courtesy of Datarama on Twitter. he's not like a superstar player yet. The Titans have had to throw a lot because they've been behind, but he has emerged since Ridley has been down as like the de facto Calvin Ridley replacement. Whereas I thought that was going to be Iomanner. It hasn't been. He's been okay, but it looked like Iomanner was clearly the better wide receiver from the Titans draft class early in the year. And maybe that's because DK was locked behind Ridley. Maybe they have more of a duplicitous role, but he has been the one that's stepped up. So he's a really interesting riser. I'm not doing anything crazy to go out and get him because he just wasn't much of a college prospect. He was still a day 3 wide receiver, but somebody to keep an eye on for sure. I've moved him into my early 3rd round pick tier. Whether you can even get him for that type of value after these last couple weeks, I don't know. But I wouldn't mind sending a 3rd for him. And lastly, before we flip over to fallers and try to wrap this show up in a reasonable amount of time, is Tyler Shuck. I already talked about him in the any second list. Just because he's a riser doesn't mean I'm excited about him. You simply have to be a riser when you go from being a backup quarterback to a starting quarterback. So he's a riser. He's certainly not someone I would start in fantasy. Not somebody that I would want to go out and acquire, but he is worth more than he was previously. So that's all I'm saying with Shug. Doug Bug, welcome to the stream. Glad you can make it. Limited liabilities. This is true. There's actually no correlation, though, in fantasy football between wide receiver athleticism and wide receiver production. It's been tested by like Scott Barrett with Spork Score. There's just really no, there's no, you can look at a wide receiver and say, hey, that wide receiver is a great athlete. It doesn't make them more likely to score fantasy points. So it's true. And it can be one of the things that is helpful for DK if he just happens to also be a good wide receiver that can earn targets. But the fact that he's a better athlete than Iomanner, to me, that doesn't overshadow the fact that Iomanner was a much, much more impressive collegiate athlete overall, like as far as his production, age adjusted, all that stuff. So I still have Ellick ranked ahead. I would still take him ahead, but certainly the gap has shrunk considerably. And I'm obviously open to the idea that DK is just the better player, but I don't think it'll be simply because of athleticism. All right. We're going to flip over to the followers here, and then we'll wrap up with some questions. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Appreciate you guys asking questions and talking in the chat. Followers today, Caleb Williams at the top of the list. I'm going to answer a question here from one of our members, Cap 10. Is it reasonable to fade Packers wide receivers since there's so many mouths to feed? I mean, yeah, to an extent. I don't think it's just a matter. I've heard this said a lot. It's not that there's just too many mouths to feed. It's that there's not one wide receiver there that's good enough to force their hand. If Devontae Adams was still on the Packers, he would still be getting a 28% target share. It's just that there isn't a Devontae Adams on the Packers. So I don't think it's simply a matter of like, oh, LaFleur likes to spread it around. They spread it around because they have a bunch of guys that are just like good at certain things and not dominant wide receivers. And it's a great testament to how the offense is designed. But yeah, Matthew Golden has not stepped up. And I don't agree with the people that are trying to say if you switched Emeka Egbuka and Matthew Golden, they'd both be doing the same thing in their opposite situations. Emeka Egbuka is getting tons of targets because he's awesome. And Matthew Golden is not getting tons of targets because he didn't do that in college at either of the schools he went to, and he didn't profile as a guy that was going to earn a ton of targets. It just is what it is. So I'm not saying he's a bust, but I'm not super encouraged by what we've seen, and that's still without Jaden Reed on the field. So yeah, I guess I would fade them. If I was going to buy anybody, it would probably be buy low on Jaden Reed maybe, but only in like a 3 wide receiver, 2 flex type of league. I wouldn't be super thrilled to really have any of these guys. And I guess I would still buy low on Golden if somebody's like really panicking. Not paying anything close to like a first round price tag, but if somebody wants to sell him for a mid-second, I would roll the dice on him for sure. All right. fallers here. Caleb Williams, like I said, he just has not played well. This is a good tweet from David Gautieri on Twitter, just has some of the stats. If you remove the game against the Dallas Cowboys, Caleb Williams ranks 22nd in yards per attempt at 6.9, 36th in passing touchdowns per game at just 0.83, 26th in completion percentage, 61%, and 37th in highly accurate throw percentage, 48.7%. He has been really poor. And outside of that game against Dallas, he's been the QB 25 in fantasy points per game. So there's no sugarcoating it. He has played really poorly. He also ranks dead last in completion percentage above expectation, according to Next Gen Stats. He's 27th, according to PFF. I mean, you can look anywhere you want to. He has struggled. And it doesn't mean that it's over for him. It doesn't mean he can't improve. Certainly, he has the weapons around him. He has the coach to maybe get the best out of him. But it is time to consider he just might not be that guy, and maybe consider selling, trying to pivot off of him. What he has going for him is he is mobile. He can scramble. That gives him a bit of a ceiling. And again, if he gets it together, this should be a very fantasy-friendly environment. But he has to be a faller because he hasn't played well. That's the bottom line. Players that I would rather have than Caleb Williams, and let me just try to look at where he's actually ranked right now on Fantasy Calc, which isn't a perfect resource, but it's certainly something. He's ranked at QB 12, 32nd overall asset. Behind him, you can see like Amari and Hampton, I think is somebody I'd rather have. I think I have him ranked too high still, to be honest. I would rather have Hampton. I would rather have McMillan. I'd rather have Nico Collins. But I think I even need to move him behind like Jordan Love at this point. I think that's probably where he belongs, is after Jordan Love. It's just he's risky, you know? He's risky because he's not performing. So he's a faller. Cam Ward is a faller. I've been trying to be very patient with a rookie quarterback in a bad situation, but he has not shown us anything. And at a certain point, there is an opportunity cost to rostering a player like this that holds value on your team that you simply can't use. And not only can you not use him, but he's not wrapped in bubble wrap like an injured player or like a rookie pick would be. He's a guy who's actively losing value, who's actively lowering his own reputation and his own expectations each and every week. There are very little signs of life with Cam Ward. So I'm losing my patience. I would rather have Daniel Jones in Dynasty at this point. I would rather have Jared Goff. I think you could talk me into Sam Darnold over Cam Ward. I would take Jordan Addison. I would take Trevion Henderson for sure. So I think you have options if you want to pivot off of Cam Ward. There's still upside for him as the number one overall pick. If he does start to play better, he can gain value quickly. And realistically, he's going to start again next year. It's very, very, very rare that we see the Josh Rosen situation. I don't think that's going to happen to Cam Ward. But that doesn't mean he's guaranteed to improve or gain a lot of value. So he's a faller for me. Michael Penix didn't even play this week, and he's a faller for me, mostly because I just kind of went back to the rankings and looked at where I had him again and realized it was too high for a guy that has no mobility whatsoever. His ceiling is to be just a high-end pocket passer on a team that wants to run the ball a lot, and he has not been good as a passer. He's been one of the worst passers in the NFL this year. I didn't think all that much of him as a prospect. He is proving himself to be a pretty limited player, mostly because he can't move that well. There was some really good stat pointed out from Hayden Winks, or maybe it wasn't a stat, just an observation, but when he has to move off of his spot in his drop back, he's been really inaccurate. So it's like he is so limited, I think, in what he can do that it gets really hard to defend having him ranked highly. So he's down to my QB 23 at this point. and it's a little bit rough. Next, we have Jake Ferguson. I'm not just moving him down here because he had a 0, but the 0 was a bit of a reminder to me to not become overly enamored with situation and to still constantly be going back to how talented is this player? How good is this player? How much does this player create in terms of opportunity for themselves? And I don't have a lot of conviction that Jake Ferguson is an elite tight end. You know, not like Tucker Kraft. I think Tucker Kraft is genuinely an elite player, which is why I have him ranked considerably higher in Dynasty, despite the fact that Ferguson before this week was scoring similarly. I just think Kraft is so clearly a supreme talent, whereas Ferguson was benefiting from the CeeDee Lamb injury, from the high passing volume. I think with Lamb back, certainly he's going to see fewer opportunities. It's not going to be like this, but he's a faller for me. He dropped a couple spots. Again, I think I was a little over my skis with his ranking. He's still in like the early second conversation in tight end premium. I could see moving him down a little bit more, but you know, then you get into like the Kincaid, Kyle Pitts range, and I think he's still like pretty clearly a better fantasy option than those guys. So he'll probably settle kind of close to where he is now. But it's just not, you know, not top 5, not even in the top 5 Dynasty conversation for me. Jamie, I think it's really hard to say with something like this. Do I think Caleb Johnson will take over the backfield? I mean, he's gotten basically no opportunities. So I guess if I had to bet one way or the other, I would just say no. I think it's uncommon that we see players just not get used as rookies and then take over a backfield. Is it possible? Sure. Yeah, it's possible. He's a stash. He's a low end guy to keep rostering for now. Cam Skattebo is a faller. It's really, really unfortunate. I had him ranked pretty highly. My RB 11 in Dynasty before this week. He was racking up expected fantasy points. He was getting all the high value touches. He was looking pretty good doing it. On, you know, like a scrappy kind of fun bad team, and breaks his ankle. It sucks. Or dislocates, I should say. And now I've moved him down for now to the RB 21. He might fall a little bit further for me, maybe another half a tier down, maybe settle him in right behind Jaylen Warren. Again, just some variance with him, how he's going to bounce back to it. I talked about him more at the beginning of the stream. If you missed that, you can go back and check that out. But I think in that early second range of value is where you could swing on him. I wouldn't want to send picks. I would much rather, as maybe a team flipping to a rebuild, be trying to offload depreciating assets. Somebody like Cortland Sutton, somebody like Deebo Samuel. Can I send that guy to buy low on Cam Skattebo? I think that's fair. Alec Ayomanor, I don't have to talk about him much. I already talked about the flip side of this with DK. Ayomanor has not built on a strong start to the season when he was getting a lot of those first read targets. He has kind of stuck in a mostly full-time role, but he just hasn't been getting as many of those looks. Still, I think has surpassed expectations for a day 3 wide receiver, but he might be more of like a Romeo Doubs type as far as what his contributions are going to look like, as opposed to being like a true fantasy difference maker. So I don't think the market ever really got that high on Ayomanor. I don't think there's anything really actionable here. If you have him, it's not like you can sell him high for a major profit. But yeah, he does drop a bit in the rankings, where I had him ranked pretty high, trying to stay ahead of a potential breakout, and it just hasn't come. Jordan Mason, we talked about in the any second list. He is a faller as well. It looked like he could kind of run away with the job when Aaron Jones went on IR. He didn't. He had maybe 1 or 2 decent games. Jones is back, cutting into the workload. He's cutting into the workload. He is getting more of the passing game work. Mason's never been a guy to get passing game work. Jones ran 17 routes this past week to just 6 for Mason. Jones had 5 rush attempts. Mason had 4. Again, not a game that they really ran the ball much, but that's a huge difference. 34% of the snaps for Jordan Mason. So he's very much like game script dependent, has to get in the end zone. Just hard guy to really trust the rest of the way, and doesn't have a lot of long-term staying power. And then finally we go to Tony Pollard, who has been outsnapped by Tajay Spears in 2 of the last 3 games. They are in a pretty even, like 50-50 split. I'm not sure what the exact dynamic of the split is because I see them both getting touches on the same drives. So they're not really rotating drives. I don't think they're really even rotating situationally. It's like they just kind of go in and out every few plays. But Spears has a higher target share this past week, ran more routes than Pollard this past week. Pollard had 2 more rush attempts. I mean, they're splitting this work almost down the middle. But Spears is the younger player. He's looked a little bit better than Pollard. I think Tony Pollard's actually like a decent running back. If you put him on a good team, he'd be fine. But he's not on a good team. He's on a terrible team that wants to split the work. There's not any touchdown opportunities at all. And he's scoring just he scored just 6.3 fantasy points this past week. He's pretty much like a low end RB3 type of play moving forward. So, and he's how old is Tony Pollard? He's 28 years old. He'll be 29 next season. Probably going to be on a new team, if I had to guess. Just doesn't seem like he has any purpose on this team. And we don't know where that's going to be. We don't know what kind of role it'll be. So, tough scene for Pollard. One of those guys I thought could be a usable RB2 this year, and it just hasn't worked out for a number of reasons. All right. So those are the fallers. Guys, we got I'll give you guys 10 minutes. Questions of all sorts are welcome. Hit me with them. Thank you guys for coming to hang out today and watch the live stream. I'll scroll back to see if I missed any comments while any more fall in here. I'll take Laporta over Kincaid in a second. I'm just not a big Kincaid fan, personally. I see Michael Carter has been released. I'm not sure if that is an announcement that requires all caps. He was pretty uninvolved anyway the last time. Sucks for me because I went and won a bunch of bids for Michael Carter, thought I was in a good spot, and then they were like, just kidding, we're going to make Bam Knight the guy. So that was a bummer for me. 12-team front runner. Remember Led Zepp 207. Allen, Dak, Dart. Gibbs owners looking to move him. Dart plus what in picks is worth it? Would almost guarantee a spot in the championship. I don't know if that's how that works, but I would try. I would try Dart plus a first and see what he says. As far as how I have them ranked, I would say Gibbs. I have close to 3 base firsts, maybe 2.75. I've got Dart at like 1 point. A first and a playoff first and a playoff second, I would try. I don't know how much more aggressive I'd want to be unless this is a really high value team, but that would be a nice ad for sure. Connor, I talked about RJ Harvey a couple different times, mainly at the beginning of the risers section. He wasn't a riser, but there were a couple questions about him. So if you want to go back to the risers, when I first go on that slide, I talked about RJ Harvey for a bit. I'm not really changing how I value him. He's kind of in the early second range for me, and I do think he will get more opportunities eventually. Luke, I don't know if you have to take this for Bigsby. You can probably hold him and just see if this groin injury keeps Barkley out of a game, because if so, you might be able to get a bit more from that manager, or you'll be able to start him. So if it was like an early third round pick, I'd be more inclined to take it. Tyler Warren in a fourth or Tet, I would take Tyler Warren in a tight end premium. If it's not tight end premium, I would take McMillan. Tyler, I don't think you're really getting anything more than a third for Pollard at this point. And I don't even know which teams are super inclined to give you a third, because he's not like helping contenders either. He's just kind of a nothing piece right now. I haven't found that there's really any market for him, but if you're a rebuilding team, I think it would be fine to just take a third and move on. What would it take to move CD as a rebuilder? Well, I don't want to move CD at all if I can avoid it. If you're like a low value team where you're going to have a really shallow lineup and you don't have a lot of picks and you don't have a lot of other assets to build around, then I could see moving him. I'd probably want to like break him down into multiple first round picks plus something else on top, or try to tier down to like a McMillan and get a first on top. Tier down to Igbuka, try to get a first on top. Probably won't get it. People are very stingy with the Igbuka shares. Maybe like Travis Hunter plus a first plus a second. That still feels light. But you want to be aggressive. I mean, you want to be demanding. You want to be picky. You have a lot of leverage over somebody that wants to add CeeDee Lamb. So don't cave to any kind of lowball offers. Any thoughts on Gentry's outlook? Is he just cooked until next year? I mean, I don't know about cooked. I think he can return like high-end RB2 production the rest of the way because he gets a lot of touches. Hopefully in the bye week, they can figure some stuff out to make this offense a little bit more functional. But yeah, long term, I think he's still a great player, and I would be buying low on him in pretty much all team situations. Shocked emoji. Would you bundle a top 4 pick with Loveland and a 2 for Genty? No, I wouldn't do that right now. I think you're selling that pick at its lowest value. If you have a championship favorite that's 1 and 5 with a likely top 4 pick, just turn it into a top 1 pick. Just go and go make some moves and make that the 101, because the 101 is going to be valued not that far off of Genty, if at all. So just go get the 101. What are your thoughts on Marvin Harrison? I think he has been pretty consistently overrated by the market based on his pedigree. And at the end of the day, he just has kind of a limited skill set that until that changes is going to prevent him from being a real fantasy star. I think he's like a low end wide receiver 2 type that is being propped up above what his production really should. It's starting to correct, but just like, for example, I have Tucker Kraft ahead of him. I have Jordan Addison ahead of him. So I think there's still meat on the bone for somebody that has Harrison to move him for some potentially better assets. Would you move Pickens and Adunze for Pearsall, Bucky, and a 26 first? I have Bucky and Adunze ranked literally actually back to back. And then Pickens for Pearsall and a first. I would take the Pearsall and a first side there. So the answer is yes. I would take the Bucky side with the first round pick. Coker and 2/3 for Ramondre and Dubs. I think if you're really desperate for some depth in like a deeper league and you need these guys to start, that's fine. But I would rather keep the Coker side here because I'm not a huge believer in Stevenson or Dobbs as long-term useful assets. I'm rebuilding. Is it worth to offer Michael Pittman and a first for Nico Collins? This is not how I want to use assets when I'm rebuilding. This is not the time you want to be trading first-round picks. I would keep the first, and I would just try to shop Pittman to someone else and see if you can turn Pittman into another first. And then I would keep those picks and let them grow in value and grow and grow and grow. And I wouldn't really think about trading them until like March or April. That's how I'd plan it. Still feeling good about Travion. I mean, I haven't been feeling good about Henderson in about 4 weeks now. But I felt as good as I have felt this past week. I mean, he broke off multiple chunk plays. It seems like they figured out how to use him a bit. It sucks that he fumbled, but for Mike Vrabel, that might actually mean more touches just based on what we've seen in the year in the past. So yeah, I still feel good about him long term. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic that he is a good player who will figure it out. What would you sell Gadsden for in a 12-team non-tight end premium? I mean, I'm always going to be greedy. I would try to get a first. I don't think you're going to get a first in that format unless people are really over their skis and out of their minds. I'd be trying for an early second I guess. Does Jack Besh's value change much if Myers is traded? It goes up. I mean, he'd be a riser for sure. I've kind of prematurely moved him up a bit, just anticipating a move, because I think Myers is one of the more likely guys to get traded, but it still puts him in like the 3rd round range because he still has to be good, and the Raiders offense is still pretty pitiful. So I wouldn't expect a whole lot, but maybe he shows some signs of life and something that you can build on value-wise in the offseason. Diggs for a 3rd, I would take Diggs. Comfortably take Diggs over a 3rd. What should I do with Skattebo as a contender? I would look for some pivot options. I think Jalen Warren is one you can get done if that team is not heavily reliant on him. I think you could look to try to turn him into picks. Although that probably won't work too well. I don't know. I don't know who's actually... That might not be a compatible trade for a lot of teams. You could try to pivot him to a wide receiver instead, and then maybe flip a different player or flip some picks for a running back. I think in the range of like Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf, you could look at a move. Running back's really tough. You know, you could try to get Travis Etienne plus. You could try to get like, I don't know. It gets really bad really fast. Maybe you could sell him for like Rico Dowdle in an early 2nd. Tyrone Tracy in a 2nd. I could see. But it's pretty rough. Just got to be honest about that. All right. We're going to get this thing over with in a second. We have one more super chat to send us out with from T. Miller. Appreciate you, dude. I'm a contender in a PPR dynasty, 1 point tight end premium. Desperate need of a tight end. Pitt's owner wants a 27 first. No. Nope. 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 No. 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 Not doing this. Anytime that you're saying I'm desperate for position X, I can send my 27 first for a player who is maybe barely just slightly inside the range that you could consider a first round pick worth. It's a bad trade 99.9% of the time. Don't do that. You want to keep the flexibility of that pick. The odds that Kyle Pitts is the difference between you winning and losing a championship, even in a heavy tight end premium format, is just so low. You are so much better off keeping that pick. Go out and lowball offer for Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, Jawan Johnson, David Njoku, Theo Johnson. Did I say him yet? Travis Kelce, Evan Ingram. I mean, heck, I think a 2nd round pick can get you Dallas Goedert in a lot of leagues, and he's outscoring Kyle Pitts. So I would not make this trade, and I'm not trying to make fun of you or anything. I'm just saying that is a major risk. I've done that trade back when I was not experienced. Go and trade my future first for some fringe guys. It almost always blows up in your face. So I would heavily advise against it, and I would look for a different way. If you could send a 2nd for Pitts with like maybe throw in a bench player on top, like a 2nd plus, a running back or a wide receiver you don't need, that I would consider. But I would not consider it first. All right, guys. Appreciate you. Thank you for hanging out. I will be back later this week with a real, legitimate, actual video. So stay tuned for that. Hope you guys win your matchups tonight. Hope you get the points that you need, unless the players that you need are going against me, in which case I hope you don't. I'll talk to everybody soon. Have a good night.